Hey, come on in the space. Come on in. Come on in. Happy Sunday, everybody. In this first weekend in February. I am actually in a much warmer climate than I normally am in. I'm in Florida, where it's in the 80s. So I am traveling this weekend, and I wasn't sure that I would be in a space where I could record comfortably. So I recorded this ahead of time, and I am actually monitoring live. So I'm here. If you have any comments, please, if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, please give StreamYard permission to show your name so I know who I'm speaking with. And come on in the space. Say, hey, I'm Renita Alexander, the Leadership Locksmith, and this is Set It Up Sunday. Set It Up Sunday is my weekly conversation around all the things that you need to do to set yourself up for success in whatever way you define success. So, be it for a day, a week, a month, or even a year. I talk a lot about actual scheduling, but I also talk about all the things that need to happen before you actually start putting things on your calendar or in your whatever device or app that you use to track what it is that you're doing. And so that's what I'm talking about. This today. I am continuing this theme of reset. The reset is my theme for the year. I've been talking about it during my Set It Up Sunday discussions. I had a whole workshop entitled Reset. And reset is obviously this idea of starting all over. It's, giving yourself grace to start all over. And that beginning of the year is a great time to talk about that, but you can reset every day, every hour, every minute. You get an opportunity to choose how you show up. And it may be different than how you just showed up, right? But we all get to choose, and we get to make adjustments in accordance with how it is that we want to show up. And so I started talking about, reflecting, and that is, maybe looking back at some things that didn't go right or may not have gone right, may have stopped you from doing what you wanted to do, as well as the things that went well that you want to do more of. And then, reframing anything that got in your way, or reframing any narrative that got in your way, or removing any obstacle that may have prevented you from moving forward. Before we get to the big reset, and this is a part of reset, I want to talk about this concept of growth. And I want to use the example of my favorite NFL quarterback, one of the reasons I started watching the NFL again, and that is Jalen Hurts. So, Jalen Hurts is the QB1 of the Philadelphia Eagles, the NFC champions, who will be representing that conference in the Super Bowl. It's next week, and I'll definitely be rooting for the Eagles. Well, actually, Jalen, but yes, I'll be watching, and along with so many other people who watch the NFL. Um, I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan. I became a fan when he was a freshman at the University of Alabama, the first freshman to start in about 30 years, the first one under Nick Saban. He was barely 18 years old, but when we got a opportunity to actually hear him, and which Nick didn't really allow the freshmen to do that, but when we actually got an opportunity to see, to hear him, we were just blown away. I think, or I was blown away by his emotional maturity and his leadership. And that's what we heard so much about during that freshman campaign. He led his team to a national championship game against Clemson, where he was one play away from they were one play away from winning the game. It was a great game. I actually got an opportunity to be there in person, and we weren't even mad that Alabama lost. It was that kind of a game. The next year, of course, he led his team back to the national championship, where he was pulled on a national stage, infamously so, at halftime of a game where he wasn't playing well, and what the coaching staff decided that they needed the threat that was the freshman phenom Tua Tagovailoa to do some passing. And so Tua famously led Alabama to win that game in overtime. And yeah, the national narrative right now seems to be that, Jalen left Alabama after that, went to Oklahoma, was drafted by the Eagles, and everybody is surprised at his success. But for those of us that have been following him for a while and know the narrative perhaps a little bit better than what is being shared on the national stage, there was a third year that Jalen stayed at Alabama. He stayed at Alabama for what would have been his junior year, for, I believe, a couple of reasons based on what I've read. One, obviously, is to finish his degree, which he did. He majored in communications, so he got a degree in communications. And then the second reason, I think, was to continue to grow. And that is the idea, the concept that I want to talk about tonight, this idea of growth. Growth mindset is one where you believe that you have the capacity to be better, where you can learn. You're not your intelligence, your skills, those things aren't necessarily fixed, but they can be developed. And it's a concept that was introduced by psychologist Carol Dweck, and she found that this idea of growth really is one of the most basic things that we carry about ourselves. So our ability to develop in our intelligence, our ability to develop in really any way, is just fundamental, foundational to what it is that we believe about ourselves. And what I believe, what I have found is that most successful people understand that there's always something else to learn. There is always things that affect our behavior, our relationship, our whether or not we are successful, whether or not we consider ourselves failures. And but and it's about what we learn and how we're willing to grow. And anytime we are taking any kind of a development training, that is us learning. That is us being willing to open ourselves up to new information. The opposite of that is a fixed mindset, and that somebody with a fixed mindset assumes that everything that we think is innate to who we are, our personality, our character, our creative ability, our intelligence, are static, right? And that we can't change those things in any meaningful way. Yes, we can learn more information, but any success we have is really just affirmation of which is inherent to us, our intelligence again. And it's an assessment of all of those givens. And so that person, of course, is not going to take the risk that somebody with a growth mindset is. They're going to avoid failure at all costs, whereas that person with a growth mindset thrives on challenge. That person sees failure not as evidence of a lack of skill or intelligence, but as a springboard for growth and for stretching existing abilities and turning those strengths into superpowers. And that is what I believe we saw with Jalen in his junior year at the University of Alabama. He continued to work on his skills, those things that he had observed from himself that he needed to know. Jalen has always been coachable. Like, that's been one of the things that people say about him, and that all that means is that he's willing to listen to feedback from others and use that to grow in the ways that he believes that he needs to grow. The emotional maturity was always there, and never more so than when he was asked to play a secondary role. So, perhaps confident but humbled in that way. And Jalen famously came back that year, and played and grew his fan base by people who were remarking on his story and what a remarkable person he was to stay that another year, where he could have perhaps started at perhaps any other program. He could have been starting, but he stayed and played a backup role. And of course, took Alabama brought Alabama from a come behind, took Alabama. I can't even get the words out to a come from behind victory against Georgia in the SEC championship. So it was kind of the same thing that had happened less than a year before, and that the backup came in and led Alabama to victory over Georgia. It was just two different people playing those roles. And so one of my all-time favorite Alabama games, watching Jalen lead Alabama to a come from behind victory in that SEC championship. And so what we saw is somebody who, continued to hone his skill, didn't go and, sit down and pout, or didn't take his talents elsewhere, continued to grow where he was, and, was able to show that growth in that game. Jalen, that year, the year that he did not start, was voted the most inspirational player by his teammates. And so I think that's a testament to who he is as a person. So what's the takeaway here? Well, I started, talking about this idea of reflection. Now, Jalen was asked in a press conference if he's had an opportunity to reflect on everything that's going on. And he said, no, I haven't. I'm still on the journey. But I would say maybe reflection is not the right word for Jalen. Maybe evaluation is the right word, because this is a young man who's constantly evaluating his performance as well as the performances of his team. And so, the takeaway here for us is, reflect or evaluate the challenge or the thing that is stopping you from moving to where it is that you want to be. Be open to information. These are all things about how you can grow or develop that growth mindset. Be open to new information in whatever form, so sometimes it's in the form of feedback from someone that, we may work with, or that sees us in a way that we don't see ourselves. And then be willing to adapt to that information that is given, because sometimes we get stuck on this, we know what we know, and we're unwilling to see things from a different perspective. So that flex, be open to it, and then the willingness to adapt to it. And then you got to put in the effort. It takes 90 to 180 days to change information or change behavior. And so to adapt those new habits that you might want to adapt that new skill that you want to adapt, you have to put in the work. And so make the effort to make the change. So, all right. So if you have any questions or comments, please share those. I'll give you a couple of minutes to share those in the chat wherever you are watching from. Again, thank you so much for joining me on this. I guess it's a Pro Bowl weekend since there's no football. Got one more week of football left. I always hate this time of the year. I'm a sports person. I grew up watching sports, but I have to admit football is my favorite. So okay, if there's no questions or comments, I'm going to let you go. You're welcome to put in comments after the fact. If you're not watching this live, you can absolutely put in comments, and I will answer those. I will probably be here on Super Bowl Sunday. I may do the same thing, record ahead of time, because I'm going to be watching the game just like so many other people. I'm going to let you go. Have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you live or recorded next week. Thanks for joining me.